Okay, so thumbnails. So here's going to be my final still life. I just grabbed one of them and I'm going to work on some thumbnails. First of all, I know I'm going to have a landscape composition. And I'm going to so loosely, I mean the thumbnail stage is so loose. I just want to loosely plot out my 5 main shapes. So I know I've got a circle or a sphere somewhere up here. I know I've got a cube somewhere around here. I've got this spiky thing on the side and it has a base. I've got a little brick. On top of that is another spherical object. That's as far as I'm going with that thumbnail. Draw out another loose border. Now I'm going to start thinking about what I've already done up here and comparing. Well, okay, I see right now a couple of things. Like my top sphere, this one, looks like it ends, the bottom of that sphere is higher than the top of this sphere. Whereas here they're about equal. So I know I need to pay attention to that now. So I need to think in terms of proportionally how much of this image, or how much of the composition does the top sphere take up. So I'm going to get a scrap piece of paper. I'm going to mark off my composition area and mark off the size of my sphere. Now, I can see that my sphere only takes up definitely less than half of my composition height. It's about equal space on the top and equal space under it to about half. So I'm going to think in terms of that. So, okay, halfway. I'm going to very lightly give myself a halfway mark. Okay, I said it's about, just about equal between halfway. So I know my sphere's going to, top of there is going to start there. Bottom's going to start about there. So I already know from my first sketch to my second that I was way too big on the top sketch. The second thumbnail is going to tell me that, okay, that top sphere should take up about that much of the composition. Now I'm going to check it for its side-to-side location. I've determined that this top sphere is a little right of center. Okay, I found center. I can see that maybe I made it a little too far over to the right, but I know it's about there. Now I'm going to check my two spheres in relation to each other. I'm going to do that by marking off the size of my top sphere. I'm calling this part, I'm calling this a sphere, and then with a little extra thing on top. I'm going to check the size of that. I see that this sphere, the sphere part, is actually bigger than that sphere. So if I've made that one that size, I know this one is a little bigger than that. Now, where does this bottom of this sphere end and this one start? Slightly lower than the top one. So I know it starts about there. I know the size is a little larger than this one. Now I've roughed out this sphere area. I know there's a little extra on top, so I'm going to throw that in now. Every thumbnail sketch I do from now on is going to get better and better, and I'm going to learn from each one before I progress. Okay, I know there's a big cube in the middle. Okay, I said middle. Let's check to see if it's middle.
There's about our center composition.
Okay, we know it's not directly in the middle. We know that edge is a little on the right side of middle. Where does it land in terms of vertical center? It's just about perfectly on vertical center. You can see I've got some room at the bottom though. I'll rough that in. I can see that it extends into my sphere a little bit. Then it comes over. I know I've got this shape. How high does that go up? To about the center of my sphere, the top sphere. Put the top around there. I know there's a base there. Brick. There's a brick I did not use yet. I can see that this brick reaches lower in the composition than this giant block here. So I'm going to start it lower. Where is it in relation to that sphere? Does it extend over the larger block? Yes, it does. Okay, that's my second thumbnail. I know I'm going to have to work on this base of that thing next time. Start filling this stuff in. I'm starting to get an idea of where things are. So I'm going to move on. I'm going to do it again. And that's all we want when we're making multiple thumbnails. So let's go again. Alright, what did we learn? There's about half vertically, half horizontally. We already know where that sphere ends up because we've already done the work. We know we've got to include that base this time, which I kind of let it go before. I don't know if you can see this. I'm just going to go ahead and work dark. Okay, we know because we already did it that there's a cube right around here. Now I'm going to start looking at these angles, and with my eye behind the GoPro, I'm going to start thinking about perspective. I know that this top plane gets a shallower angle because it's closer to the horizon. Remember from weeks ago? Work out that angle down there. I can see I'm a little off, but I'm starting to get the feel of that cube. Starting to get the feel of that brick. I know the brick ends still just above the bottom of that cube. These are the sorts of things that I'm working out in my thumbnails. Okay, look at that. Look how this cube ends about halfway in the brick. I had it completely wrong. It's more like that. Overlaps the brick some, more like that. In fact, almost to the end of that brick. And I'm a little steep on my angle. This is where you could be wrong. I'm not erasing, I'm just going to it. This is where you make all your mistakes. Okay, what do we know from last time? That sphere, that bottom sphere, is supposed to be bigger than that top sphere. Well, I don't have it that way. I screwed it up. I know this one's going to be a little smaller then. This has that extra portion that lines up just about with the bottom of that top sphere. So, super loose. That's what a thumbnail sketch is. Okay, look at this. Here's why we sketch thumbnails. I think compositionally I'm all too far over to the left. I have a lot less room on my left side than I do on my right side. And that's not accurate. I should have a little bit less, but not that much. So I know next time to watch out for that. I mean, that's all thumbnails are. It's where you make your mistakes. And it's where you start to get an overall feel for your composition, and by the time you're done doing this stuff, you know this so well in your heart and in your brain that once you start getting it on good paper, you're not going to make these mistakes. So, okay, another thing, and I talk about this on the week 10 homework sheet. I talk about starting to block in what's going to be shaded. Now you could start, just to get an idea, just indicate areas of shade. Think about your light source. You know, make yourself an arrow and determine where the light's coming from. You know this side's going to be shaded. You know you're going to be very heavily shaded down here. You know your background's going to be shaded. You're going to have a core shadow there. You're going to have a core shadow running through here. Going to have a cast shadow somewhere around half of that cube. Go ahead and indicate that. See how the shadow comes across. That. That's all we're doing for thumbnails. That's all you need to do. Then I would start it over again and just start applying the things I learned again and again. And you start to see from your first thumbnail to your last that the composition just develops naturally. You start to really learn where things are, and you can go ahead and make mistakes, and just eventually you start to know this whole drawing inside out. And it's loosely proportioned. Now the next step, when you take this and start to do one big preliminary drawing, that is when we're going to really get into proportion, and we're going to start really taking solid proportions. You know, we approximately know at this point that this plane of this giant cube is a little larger than that plane, and we've got that roughed in. But when we go to the large drawing, we're going to start figuring out exactly how much larger it is in proportion. And that's when we're going to start thinking in terms of half of that. Right? And then that's when we start applying these measurements, right? If you had one giant cube, that's when we start measuring the relationship. We know, oh, that other one's going to be about that long. But we do that on our next stage when we start to really work out proportion. But for thumbnails, all it is that. It's just a rough sketch. And the more you do these, just the more you get the idea of this composition in your mind. And this just helps you. The more you do, the more it helps you.